CEO of Thinking Beyond Borders. And you're here at our launch party, our San Francisco launch party.
Woo!
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. I grew up here in the Bay Area, came back after being away for many, many years, and am back to stay and back to make this home. And in many ways, I came back partly because this is the right home for Thinking Beyond Borders, too. We founded the organization in 2007 back in Fairfield, Connecticut. And since that time, we've worked with students from all over the country, and actually we've worked virtually as a team. But we've come into our own in the last couple of years. And it's time for us to have a home, and this is definitely where we want to make home. Hopefully you'll see why. You'll see how, in many ways, it's hard to imagine any other community being the right community for TBB. We are an educational nonprofit, and our mission is to empower and inspire students to address critical global issues. We're out to change the world. We want to fix the things that need to be fixed. That's the really easy way to think about it. We are those dreamers, we are those idealists. That's who we are. But we're serious about what we do too. So we came up with this theory of change. We did it by doing a lot of research. And it's built on a lot of assumptions, so I'm going to try to make those as plain as possible. Our first assumption is this, is that history, it kind of keeps going in a straight line for the most part. There's always been conflict in the world. There's always been injustice, there's always been inequity, and there probably always will be. We're not the only ones that thought that. A lot of the great leaders of social change thought that too. And what we also find is that we assume this to be true, that throughout history there have always been people with really good skills and really good intentions who wanted the world to be better than it is, who wanted more equity and justice. They dreamed about what could be. Dr. King, one of our great heroes, is one of the people we looked to as we were looking at this theory and looking at these assumptions and trying to say, okay, but how do we make it different? How do we get closer to the could be? How do we make more progress toward equity and justice and move away from at least some of the conflict that's out there, some of the injustice and inequity? And he said to us, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Now, a minute ago I told you that history generally works in a straight line, and that there's always kind of been conflict. He believed that too. But he also believed that you could, in fact, make a difference. You could, in fact, bend the arc more toward equity, more toward justice. As we looked at history, we looked to see what was it that actually bent the arc. And we found that there are, in fact, some really incredible agents of change out there, all throughout time. Some of them we know, right? Dr. King, Mandela, Gandhi, Yunus. Some of them whose names you've never heard before, because they do it on a very local level, in a small community, here or abroad, in places where we all grew up, and in places that we'll never go to. But that those great agents of change shared two things beyond just having good skills and good intentions. They shared two capacities. The capacities for higher order empathy. Higher order empathy, we talk a lot about empathy in the social sector right now, particularly in education. We talk about empathy, and unfortunately we don't get as far as we should. The discourse right now is about that empathy of, that person's hurting, they're a victim of violence or oppression, and I want their lives to be better. I want to do something to make their lives better. Or I, at minimum, think it at least shouldn't be that. You know, the truth of the matter is, we're all born with that. And when we're not born with that, we're diagnosed as mentally ill. That's the easy empathy. And if that's all we're shooting to develop, we've missed the point. The higher order empathy is the hard one. It's the one that says, I see that person doing something that is violent or oppressive. I still love them as a human being, and I believe in their capacity to actually do good. And that part of my work needs to be to help create a space in this community for them moving forward to help to lead toward equity and justice, to use their capacity for good and access it and to become part of this community in a really positive way. That's the hard one. That's Dr. King in front of a church saying, we have to love our neighbors even though they've turned fire hoses on us. That's the hard one. The other thing that they had was a really unique capacity as learners. They were humble learners. They valued questions over answers. Answers can be dangerous because they often stop us from asking more questions to develop a more nuanced, a more dynamic understanding. They also understood the power of knowledge seeking to bring communities together. Right? This idea that if we honestly go out and ask questions of ourselves, of each other, that in fact that tends to bring people together. Rather than the, hey, I've got the answer, everybody follow me. Suddenly you find yourselves in a room with at least one person, if not two or three or four, all saying that and moving in different directions. And again, answers can be dangerous sometimes. These are two capacities. These are two traits that the really great agents of change, the proactive agents of change throughout history have shared. At Thinking Beyond Borders, we decided that this was the theory of change that we wanted to pursue. To find that moment in students' lives, students who have those good skills and are developing them, students who have those good intentions, and see if we couldn't develop those skills, those traits, in those students to bend the arc of history toward equity and justice. That's what we try to do. Now, the question is, how do we do it? We've created international education programs. Think intensive study abroad. Unlike most of what study abroad looks like out there, it's students living in communities abroad, living with families, homestay families, where they're building relationships with folks like Mariana is doing with her family in Bua, Ecuador, and of course with the fish that was being cleaned for dinner. It's about humanizing this question of what is development, what is poverty, what is equity, what does justice look like? Putting real human faces to that, having the types of relationships that make it really hard for us to give a simple answer. It's about working alongside local experts in communities abroad, local experts who are trying to address critical issues in their local community. This is Johnny in South Africa, in the township surrounding Plettenberg Bay. Johnny was shadowing home-based caregivers who were working with communities of primarily HIV and AIDS patients, though they were suffering from other illnesses as well. His job was not to go and volunteer. That's not what we do. We are not a service organization. That's a hard one to wrap our brains around because most people look at us and say, oh, these are service trips. That's great. We don't do that. Our students are 17, 18, 19 years old. They're not experts in anything, including picking up a shovel. And the issues that they're going to learn about are not simple. They don't require manpower. They require a deep understanding of local culture. They require a deep understanding of what that particular critical issue is. We don't assume that those students have that knowledge. And experts in the field, particularly local experts, really don't want us to assume that either, and we shouldn't. So our students are there through our partnerships with these local NGOs abroad to learn. Yes, they do some hands-on work as a process of learning. But our partnerships are built with organizations abroad who say, yes, we really want passionate learners from abroad who want to come and learn about these issues, who want to learn from us as experts. In this particular case in South Africa, where we've had a really vibrant partnership, one of the things that Mandy, the executive director, has shared with us over the last 5 years is that our students visiting is the highlight of the year for her staff. Women who, generally speaking, don't have a high school education, most of them don't have a middle school education, who are being asked hard questions and treated as experts, because they are. We also offer them an intensive curriculum. It's university level, and it's challenging the students through an inquiry-based approach. Inquiry meaning everything we do starts with a question. But this is true inquiry-based curriculum, which means our goal is not to get to the end of the seminar or the end of the reading and say, I've got the answer now. Our goal is to get to the end of the reading and say, I've got a much more nuanced, deeper understanding of this issue, and now, as I'm leaving this particular moment of studying and learning about this thing, my goal should be to figure out what the next level of questions are. Sometimes those are questions for other people. Sometimes those are questions for ourselves. As we look at our assumptions about who we are, what is actually happening in the world, and what our place is within it. What are our ethics and morals, and how do we actualize those as individuals to create a better world, to bend the arc toward equity and justice? They do this as part of a group, 16 to 18 students who travel together to create a learning community that is tight, that is intentional. They're traveling with 3 teachers, master's level educators. These are not guides on a tour. These are master's level educators, mid-career experts who have come to this because they're passionate about teaching and learning in an environment that's actually about teaching and learning in the real world, about real world issues, where we ask all the hard questions and don't shy away from any. About class, about gender, about race, about you name it. We put it on the table. Most importantly, we're challenging students, we're challenging ourselves as educators to question our assumptions. Some of you were already interviewed. Hopefully you saw on the way in that many of you have the question, what is international development, on the back of your name tag. That question starts our curriculum, our very first seminar. It ends our curriculum at the very end of the program, and it is a running theme throughout. And if you've never been part of a conversation about this question, start it at the dinner table one night. And just keep asking questions so that you understand each other really well. It opens up a whole world. And it's the crux of the types of questions we need to be asking if we actually want to make progress toward equity and justice. So, we do this in a number of different ways, but over the last 5 years, and in fact we have 5 graduated classes, we have 85 alumni, we have 31 additional students in the field this year, and they've all been part of our flagship program, our Global Gap Year. A gap year is that space between high school and college. It's a transition time. Thinking Beyond Borders is not in love with the gap year. We are in love with that transitional moment. That moment in our lives between 17 and 19 when we start to think differently about ourselves. We start to question the ethics and morals that we were raised with. Not walk away from them, but look at them critically to understand them. We start to develop the ability to do metacognition, that ability to take the big step back, see all the pieces on the board, and see how they interact in really dynamic ways. And when we get pushed hard in that, we get really good at it. We can put ourselves on the board and see how we interact dynamically on that, among all those different pieces. We start to shape our adult identity. It's a critical moment of transition that when you're 21 studying abroad as a junior, a lot of that is set. It's done. This is a critical window of opportunity for youth development, particularly for identity development, for those people that we want to stay deeply committed to doing this type of work over a lifetime. This 2-semester program has students living in 4 different countries for about 6 weeks each, studying a different development issue in each country, natural resource management and the environment in Ecuador. They're heading to Thailand to study sustainable agriculture. They're heading to India to look at education. They're heading to South Africa to study public health, the HIV/AIDS epidemic. In between, they're stopping in some places to take a breath, to have a week to process in between each unit, and see some of the other great wonders of the world, cultural wonders of the world. Finally, they're ending in the United States. This is one of the really unique things of all of our programs. They end in the United States. A week in Washington, D.C., meeting folks at the World Bank and the IMF, lobbying their members of Congress on the Hill, meeting other folks who are the policymakers, the decision makers of some of the biggest international NGOs that are working in the international development space. And the great thing is that after 2 semesters in the field and asking these types of questions, they sit down with some of the biggest thinkers, some of the biggest policymakers, and they tend to blow them away with the level of questions that they ask. They dive into real conversations because they're ready for it. Where the conversations matter. Not just in the details, not just in the skill set, but in those questions of why are we doing what we're doing and what ways are going to be the most effective ways to get this done, to bring people together. Of course, after 5 graduated classes, we have to ask the question, does it work? Do we get the job done? So Andrea Kenwell, who is, I think, behind the curtain, Andrea Kenwell, our administrative director, yeah, she was finishing a master's at NYU in International Ed this past spring, and she did a phenomenal job of building a tool set for us to assess our programs. This is the first time we've ever gotten to share it publicly, so we're very excited to share it with you. We identified, first we looked at all of these existing tools that were out there, these existing assessment tools, and we looked at what was working best for programs that were doing different types of things along the lines of what we do. We then figured out exactly what areas of growth we wanted to measure for. What traits are we hoping to develop and see change around? Found 22 student blogs. These were blogs that students kept. They wrote all throughout the program, but they were unprompted, unrequired writing. It's what they chose to share with family and friends. And then we coded them based on a scale of -1, meaning they got nowhere near and were moving in the opposite direction of the trait we were looking for, up to 3, which is they're really excelling in that trait. And then we broke the program in quarters and looked at how those numbers changed over the course of the year. We looked at empathy first. We looked at 4 different traits related to empathy, and we saw significant growth for a lot of students. These are the aggregated numbers across 22 students. But that idea of empathy for all, that higher order empathy, huge growth of 430%. I won't read it all to you, but you can kind of take a look. And I'll be blogging about this in the next week, so I'll send that out to all of you so you can take a closer look. But we were seeing huge growth in this area of empathy, the higher order empathy. We looked at their capacity as learners and how that was changing, how it evolved over the program. Looking at how they were identifying their own assumptions and perspectives. Looking at their sense of humility. Looking at whether or not they were seeking out collective action rather than saying, I've got the answer, everybody follow me. Finally, we looked at purpose and direction. This is one we haven't talked about yet, but as you open the brochures around the room, you'll see purpose and direction is something we talk a lot about to students and parents. Because at this age, particularly for students in the United States right now, they're coming out of a K-12 system that has said, get good grades and get good test scores to get into college. That's what your learning is about. It's not about your ethics or your morals. It's not about the real world. Study these theories, memorize what you need to memorize, and then get into college. That's your learning. And suddenly they're 18 getting to college where there's a mountain of incredible educational resources ready for you that aren't handed to you the way they are in K-12. And we're asking them to find a sense of purpose and direction that hopefully will do something great for society too. But they're out of touch because what we've asked them to do in K-12 separates them from their ethics and morals, separates them from the real world. Finding that sense of purpose and direction before they start college or as they're making the transition to college is a critical component to them getting the benefits of being in that university. Taking advantage of all those incredible resources that they need if they're actually going to go out and move the needle on these social issues. And we saw great changes there. We found them finding a sense of identity as an agent of change. This last one we think is really important. Creates new initiatives and engages existing structures. My parents, who are here, will tell you that when I was 19, I was one of the people that was saying corporations are bad. Everybody stop doing what you're doing. We're ruining the world. We have to stop it all. We need a revolution. It all needs to stop. It's all wrong. We're trying to push students past that. We're trying to push the students past that point where they start to say, there's real value in what's being done out there. There may be some things missing. Our goal is not to say, well, we're the next generation, we have all the answers, and nobody before us did. Which is a real danger in the social sector. We do that a lot. We just have to innovate the right answer. Nobody's found the answer yet, but we're going to figure it out. Our generation's got it. Don't worry about it. We got it covered. We're trying to get students past that. We want them to start their career saying, I need to stand on the shoulders of giants, and then keep reaching up for the next thing. We've had a lot of great success. As a 501c3 nonprofit, we have an earned income strategy, for those of you who are interested in business models. That means that our tuition actually self-sustains us as an institution. We do fundraise for scholarships and such, but that ability to self-sustain in that way allows us to stay true to our mission. We're not dependent on funders to point the direction of what our program should do. We're not dependent upon outside interests to say, well, here's where the money is, go chase that. We're able to stick to what we know to work. We're offering 3 new programs in our attempt to start to bring this program to more students. Our programs are expensive at the moment, and that's one of the hurdles we're working to overcome. These 3 new semester programs, they're 13-week programs, are less than half of what the 2-semester program is, and it brings it in line with what the rest of the gap year market that we talked about is offering. So we expect to find a lot more students coming into our program this year, going from 31 students this year to we expect over 100 next school year, next academic year. This is where I start talking to you about how you might be part of what we do. Part of the reason we felt this event was so important to do now is that we are a part of this community and we want to be a part of this community. But being part of this community, actually, part of the benefit of that is that we need others who believe in what we do to share in this process with us. There are a lot of key things that need to happen for us as we move forward. And so tonight I want to throw a few of those offers out there, offers of opportunities to be involved and help us get done what we need to get done. One of those offers is we need help funding the next stage of growth. We need $100,000 in growth capital. These are direct investments we can make starting in January that will allow us to do a really effective job of getting out there and filling those programs for the coming year. The nice thing having an earned income strategy, again, for those of you who like business models in the room, is that we don't have to keep going out and fundraising every year to fill those programs. We fill the programs this year, and the revenue that comes in allows us to keep going out and be self-sustaining, to continue to grow those programs indefinitely. That's one thing we're looking for. As a 501c3, of course, we really benefit when that comes in the form of a grant or a major gift, or even in small gifts. We are also in the position to consider an impact investment to fill those needs. Number 2 is that we are trying to establish ourselves here in the community, and we need office space to do that. Right now, we're just 2 here in San Francisco. I have 2 more staff around the country who will hopefully be joining us in the next year here in the Bay Area. But just having a couple of desks together in an office space a couple days a week would be a huge step forward for us. And obviously, right now, we are self-sustaining, but we're trying to turn as many resources as we can over to scholarships and making our programs accessible to as many students as possible. Third is we're looking for board members. Our board is fantastic. They work together very well. John Falker is one of our board members here. He lives here locally, works at Intel. He's made incredible contributions like many of our board members do. We're looking for folks who believe in what we do and are looking toward the future. And then finally, we think particularly as our assessment continues to come together and we continue to pull new findings out of that assessment and grow it over the next couple of years, we've got a story we want to tell. Because there are some really important forefronts that are just on the horizon for us. One is this idea of the college transition. We hear a lot about the higher ed crisis. And a lot of the conversation is it's just too expensive, so we have to blow it up and do something else. We think that's a mistake. College, we have an unbelievable infrastructure of higher education in this country. The problem isn't that it's too expensive. The problem is we're not taking advantage of the value that's there. Because students are not arriving on campus ready for that level of education. Sure, they can read and write and do math. The question is, do they have a sense of purpose and direction to make meaning out of it? College and university partnerships to be able to offer our programs as an accredited part of their freshman year is just on the forefront for us. It's a process we're developing right now in what's looking like a very promising partnership with a college, a university, a state university here in California. Another is that this sense of purpose and direction is, for those of you who are familiar with the college success space, this is helping students from underserved or underrepresented populations not just getting into college, but succeeding once they're there, overcoming these astronomical attrition rates, dropout rates. There's been a lot of great work done out there, but one of the pieces that we often hear missing in that conversation is helping students find the sense of purpose and direction for why they're there. Not just that it's going to help me get a career, but what's my career going to help me do that relates to how I see myself and how I see the world. There's a lot of great stuff on the horizon for us. And of course, there's our mission that's at the core of what we do. Empowering and inspiring students to address critical global issues. Can't thank you enough for coming out tonight. If anything I said sparked an interest in continuing a conversation and exploring ways that you might be able to get involved, or folks that you know who might be interested in Thinking Beyond Borders could get involved, please come and find me before the end of the night. My lovely wife, Carrie, who's in the front row here. You can touch base with her as well. Jim, who, I'm not sure where he is, our business operations manager, who welcomed you as you came in the door. You can approach him. You can also approach Andrea. But before we finish, I wanted to give you a chance to meet one of our alumni as well. Silviano Valdez is a senior at Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana, and he's done some phenomenal work in his 4 years since leaving Thinking Beyond Borders. He's actually going to join us via Google Hangout. So Andre's going to get that set real quick. He won't be able to see you, but he's going to chat you up as soon as he comes up on the screen.